Hey everyone, it is Kai, and today we're going to talk about what if 7 Seas did not exist. Now, this is actually from a comment from yesterday, and I found this very interesting, where we just have a what if scenario, you know? What if, Bushiroad had some good R&D back then and went, wow, 7 Seas, it's a problem, better not print it this way, or they just banned it early, right? What happened if that happened, and what would it be now? This isn't 2020 7 Seas, by the way. 2020 7 Seas is fine, it's an okay deck, and it's a budget deck. But back then in 2016, 7 Seas was a super budget deck, and it was super good. It was tier 0 and cost $7, right? But now, the easiest way to probably talk about what 7 Seas was is we look at the World Championship in 2016. So this is the English World Champions. We got first place, we got Daniel Middlesworth playing 7 Seas. Second place with Andy Lowe playing 7 Seas. Third place, we had Liu Bo Chen, who played Thingsaver SGD, that's the secret cards. And then out in fourth place, we had, they don't list it, but I think it was a Victor, piloted by Doan. So overall, these were lots of 7 Seas, well at least 7 Seas did very well in the English format. Now, what was so good about 7 Seas that would just absolutely make it that good, right? Make it dominating? Well, back then, in G era, right, you could only stride when your opponent was at grade 3. Not now. Now you can stride if you started the turn at grade 3 or so, but back then you couldn't stride if your opponent was not at grade 3. So 7 Seas would just sit at 2, sit at 1, but most of the time 2, play their game, set up a nice field for basically free, and then just hit you in the face and crit you and be really consistent like that. And then you couldn't really do anything because you had no effects. Every single effect was pretty much locked behind Generation Break. So you played vanilla while they played half vanilla. And then that's it. Couldn't G-guard because your opponent has to be 3 when you G-guard. And yeah, so that was why it was so good. And it was also very cheap, so it was kind of easy to build. Now, there's some pretty funny stories about 2016. And that was, I think, Daniel Middlesworth, the champion here. I think the story went he forgot his G-zone or something, so he had to play 7 Seas, and that was probably the best decision you could have made, because he won the whole thing. Other funny story was my friend Mark. He was playing GC, and back then there was like Continentals, and he was on round 1 in Continentals. He knew that there was only one other person, who was actually Andy Lowe, playing 7 Seas in that tournament. Only one others, so he went, okay, it's near the end of the round. We're both playing very slowly for some reason, so we'll probably get a game loss, a double loss. But that's fine, because my tiebreakers would be so bad, I won't face the 7 Seas player until maybe near the end of tournament, or maybe I can just skip it all around, right? So if I get this double loss, that's good. I can beat everyone else and then just probably win. So he took the double loss, but what actually happened was that Andy Lowe went to time as well. For some reason, I don't know how you go to time with 7 Seas, but he did. So that's like an achievement in itself. So they played each other next round, and he lost, and Mark lost. So that was the end of his Continentals tournament. But apart from that, yes. So what happens if 7 Seas did not exist? Now, 7 Seas was in this meta where it was like a rock, paper, scissors meta. There was basically 3 big decks we all had to be careful of. One was 7 Seas itself, because it would beat pretty much any deck that relied on stride. The other one was Gear Chronicle, that once it got to stride would beat everything else. And then the last one was Sanctuary Guard Dragon. Now we saw Liu Bo Chen's kind of hybrid SGD deck. Most players just didn't run Thingsaver. They just run 4 SGDs. They run a bunch of others, just normal grade 2s and grade 1s. Didn't even rely on Generation Break. I think maybe at best they run 1 Twin Sword. They didn't even bother running heals at the time, especially in Japan. They just ran 16 crits. So that deck ideally wanted to win on first stride, but it was kind of like a mid-range deck, you could say. So if it faced against a 7 Seas deck, no problem. It doesn't rely on striding. It can just play normal game. Once it got to limit break, its middle column came really huge. It ran so many crits, it could kind of out-crit 7 Seas and win like that. And then when it played against like a normal stride deck as well, it would just basically try and win first stride. And once it got to that first stride, it would just ride the Sanctuary Guard Dragon stride and then just win, like Regalia and win. on that first stride, because it just made huge columns that after fighting for first stride, the opponent couldn't guard at all, so you just win like that. So it kind of had the best of both worlds, but it wasn't as consistent as a 7 Seas deck in beating a stride deck, and it wasn't as consistent as a stride deck beating other stride decks. There was some slight consistency problems, so that was kind of the middle ground, but you had this nice little rock, paper, scissors thing going. But here's the thing, right? If 7 Seas doesn't exist, SGD actually loses one of its good matchups, right? So it does pretty well against 7 Seas, but then against like a stride deck, against a GC that could kind of stabilize, against a person that kind of knew what it was doing, was denying damage, not giving you that counterblast to get your Lus off and stuff like that, it gets to a point when you had to start striding, and then your GC deck will start stabilizing, and then you could start losing from there as the royal deck. So I think it's pretty easy to say that if 7 Seas did not exist, GC would just pretty much be the dominating deck. It would be the timely deck that would be dominating. Okay, now that's kind of like the easy answer to the question. Let's look at WGP, because WGP happened that year, 2016, and it was like close to the similar format as English, except we had only like the Asian countries, right? But you can see here that WGP had Gear Chronicle winning, and I think Aneruth, I don't know if I'm saying his name correct. It looks Thai, but yeah, GC won first. Jasper, familiar name. He came second that year. He was just a kid. I actually met Jasper at WGB 2016. Probably didn't know each other back then, but now we do. But yeah, he played GC and he came second. Third place was actually a 7 Seas deck, and then fourth place was another GC deck, which is pretty crazy because 7 Seas still was at full power then, and wasn't touched. But I think in that tournament, if I remember correctly, there was like 2 or 3 other 7 Seas decks as well, like participating, and they didn't make it. Now, why did GC do so well in WGP instead? So I think back then, right? Back then, the West wasn't really as up to date in terms of strategies and overall, like, you know, not just strategies, but like decks. They're kind of behind. Not like compared to now, where everyone is so far on curve. Everyone's on topic, and in premium, the West is probably better than Japan by quite a lot. But back then, it was the opposite way. Japan was a big powerhouse in innovating ideas. They got their sets quicker, and there was just like way more people playing the game. So there was just way more tournaments, way more ideas being spawned, and the way to play against GC 7 Seas was just throw it on your hand and rush face and hope you just trigger better. That's it. Like, if you're playing GC against 7 Seas, you're in a bad matchup already, you gotta get lucky, you just gotta play it out, and that was it. There was way more 7C play back then compared to English as well. I think English, a lot of it was still on either the GC train, that was like definite number 1, and then second place I think would be like a random, but it definitely wasn't 7 Seas. 7 Seas really didn't start catching on until we started going into the end of 2016. But in Japan, 7 Seas, you could see it like basically every single week. You know, like a local 7 Seas, VGCS 7 Seas. So you had that going. So by then, I think if you were playing in the Japanese format, you probably had a better idea on how to deal with 7 Seas. And although that idea was very primitive, it really isn't something that the West really picks on or picks up on. So I think that might have been the big difference. Otherwise, Vanguard happened, right? Vanguard could have happened, and you just play Vanguard and maybe 7 Seas brick. Happens. Now, 2016 was actually a great year. You'd be surprised what came out in 2016, right? It's definitely a better year than 2020 for sure. There were actually some very, very interesting decks that was so suppressed by 7 Seas and SGD, and probably GC as well, because don't forget, GC has a Terror round that basically shuts down nearly everything. But don't forget that Enigmatic Assassin was released that year. And I think that year in one of the VGCSs, they started building Blade Wings with 4 Enigmatic Assassin. And that combined with like the Fighters Collection 2015, like Blade Wing Sullivan and all that, you started seeing OTK-DI popping up. And that would start to become a real thing going 2017, and right now DI is still that crazy OTK deck, but 2016 was the beginning of this Dark Irregulars Wombo combo deck, right? Enigmaticus, and don't forget, maybe we need to thank GC. We need to thank 7 Seas for not allowing your opponent to stride. Maybe we need to thank SGD. SGD actually just destroys that deck. I played against 16 crit SGD, and SGD just basically is like you solitaring against like a dummy and beating them down, alright? So, back then, that deck didn't stand a chance. But another deck that was really interesting was also the Wiseman Loop deck, alright? Wiseman didn't get its full power until, I think, BT11, where it got the second Fenrir. But it had we already had the starting basis for what the Wiseman combo. And I probably had everything back then. It just didn't have it had the stride as well, so it basically was just missing like the second Fenrir, which opened up a lot of options for it. But we had Fenrir. We had Fenrir, Wiseman going, and although they didn't see much, that was actually popular in Japan, I think, but didn't see much play in the West. So, yeah. But I mean, against this, what'd you think, right? You pump your Wiseman up, and bam, it's shut down, or just dead before you can even get there. So, there were some really interesting ideas being made in 2016 that really didn't see the light of day until the end of 2017, but otherwise, yeah, I think that's pretty much what would have happened. GC would have dominated. Maybe we would have seen some more interesting decks. Like, I think like Kagura got their Blade Master Titan halfway through the year, but really didn't do much. Overall, the sets towards the end of that year really didn't help against like GC being just the dominant stride deck. And yeah, I think even like Link Joker, you know, Messiah wasn't a thing. Chaos Messiah kind of died off because smart players, GC players just didn't care. They just destroy your face. I think Chaos might have done fine against like a 7 Seas, but yeah, with 7 Seas matchup gone, then there's no point playing Chaos. Alright. So overall, GC dominates, Timely dominates, GC probably disappears the next year, along with 7 Seas also disappears the next year after that, but I think we'll just be seeing GC domination. So that's basically my idea on what if 7 Seas does not exist, and maybe we'll do another one of these later, but maybe another deck. Let me know in the comments what deck do you want disappeared, or what do you want happening. All right, you know, like in Doraemon, you can use that the telephone booth that changes reality. Let me know what reality you want changed. Okay, like and subscribe. See you guys next video. Bye.